It's the fine detail that makes all the difference in a job. And spots like this around this tail light on this Camaro require some delicate fine detailing to get the shapes just right. There are no blocks that are good for tight spots like this. Not even my billy sticks are handy in such a situation. I mean, I could use them, but it's better to just fold this sandpaper up into like a mini block and work these spots. You can see my black guide coat is revealing some low spots there to the left of where I'm sanding, and those spots will not sand out. This was a spot where it was been hit by another car, backed into something and caved it in a little bit, but I'm going to have to put a little more filler in those spots to get it to be leveled out. I'm not going to be able to sand it out in this pass, but I've got a high crown there where the bumper comes up over the edge, and then a reverse curve into a very narrow flat spot between the reverse curve at the top of the ridge there and the reverse curve below the ridge of the taillight opening. There's probably a 3/8 of an inch or to a 1/2 inch flat spot there, and it's going to require some real finesse to get it just right. I'll have to use a narrower piece of sandpaper, folded into like a narrower little block once I get the curve sanded. I'm not too worried about it right now because I know I'm going to have to add more filler to the spots where it's still black. So now I'm going up to the upper part, and there's basically a reverse curve coming off the trunk opening down to the reverse curve that comes out for the taillight opening. So I'll be blocking this exclusively with my multiple folded 80 grit sandpaper. When you fold it in several times and bend it, it becomes a rigid block. It will not flex, in its length. It's not very long, but that rounded face that I'm sanding with is not flexible. It's as straight as an arrow, and as long as you aim it right, it's going to do what you want it to do. Now I'm sanding down here on the lower part with just the flat part of my sandpaper block, and although that won't get it perfectly straight, it's close. When it comes time for blocking the primer in this area, I will be using my billy stick with 150 wrapped around it. But for right now, I'm just roughing in Bondo, and I can get the Bondo plenty straight enough with just my folded sandpaper. The whole back end of this car has been in trouble a time or two. It's been hit underneath the taillight on both sides, and this side's all wrinkled up where they put a quarter panel on it back in the day sometime. They didn't do a terrible job of putting the quarter panel on, but they didn't do a great job either. Of course, it might have been an aftermarket quarter panel even at the time that they put it on, so it seems to be a reasonable quality, but there's no telling if it was a new old stock or a aftermarket quarter panel. But whichever way, it didn't fit down at the bottom where I cut the rust off down at the bottom of the quarter panel behind the tire. The quarter panel skin did not fit the inner structure at all down there, which is why I'm assuming it was an aftermarket quarter panel. But those are the things you run into when you're rebuilding an old car. This car's 50, 60, whatever years old, 69. So that's 30, 50-something year old car. And the factory didn't get everything right back then. And, wasn't any laser straightness about any cars in 1969. And I assure you that my job will be nicer than this car was from the factory. It'll be straighter and smoother and shinier and better fit and finish than what it was when it rolled off the assembly line. Now, better quality paint is a relative term. When the factory did the job, they used lacquer, but it was high bake lacquer. And if you know anything at all about paint, you know that stuff will last forever if it's not buffed down too thin. And you know the rust comes from the seams and the cracks and stuff. It didn't come from the outside of the car, because that old high bake lacquer is tough. Now we're going to use high-tech, new materials, primers and base coats and clear coats and stuff, so it's going to have a good strong paint job on it when it's done. But the actual factory paint job quality was not that bad as far as longevity goes. The problems came from the seams, like I said before, but the paint itself was a good strong paint, even though I definitely don't like working in lacquer. There's no question that the factory lacquer was tough stuff. And actually, now that I mention it, the refinish lacquer that we used back when I started doing paint and body work in the early 80s, actually in the 70s, was nowhere near as tough as the factory lacquer. It was not high bake lacquer, it was air dry lacquer, and it was not as strong as that factory paint. So repairs that were done in body shops back in the day, like, when I started in body shop, we were all combination men. We painted our own repairs. We fixed the dents and straightened them out and monoed it and primered it and painted it with lacquer and buffed it and all that. Well, that air dry lacquer was nowhere near as strong as the high bake lacquer from the factory. They would, spray the thing in the booth at the factory, and then it would go through an oven that literally melted the paint and smoothed it out to a shine, and it also made it tough as nails. But enough about lacquer. We're working on getting this thing ready for a urethane paint job, and I've already sprayed, this area that I'm working has been sprayed with self-etching primer, 2K self-etching primer that has basically an acid for a thinner, and it eats its way into the metal. And I've sprayed primer on top of that and blocked it down, and now I've filled the low spots, and that's what I'm doing now, is refining the little nooks and crannies and little low spots that were left over from blocking it the first time. And I'll get this bodywork straight enough to where I put my second pass of 3 coats on it, and then it will all block out nice and straight. I won't need to block it again, because I'm not doing the $20,000 job on this. I just want it to be nicer than it was when it was new. So that doesn't require it to be blocked 2 or 3 times. So twice will be plenty enough for this job. See, I've sprayed it with primer, and I've done my rough end body work, and then I do my rough end primer. So I roughed it in and fixed what big dents I found, and then I put 3 coats of primer on it, then I blocked it and found the low spots and the depressions and stuff like that, the little things, and that's what I'm fixing now. But you cannot do a second blocking and then just sand that and paint it. You're going to have patterns and stuff that will not go away, no matter how you X pattern it or straight sand it or whatever. It's going to have patterns that will not go away. So I'll put 2 more smooth coats of primer on it and hand sand it before I paint it, and everything will be good. And I won't use a block when I hand sand it. If you want a masterpiece, it has to have the master's touch. You can think of that block as a condom, and it's ruining the feel of perfection. If you know how to sand her right, she'll glow like never before. With that in mind, please touch my like thingy and share my shizzle and subscribe, damn it!